How do you lose an entire empire? Seriously, imagine a massive, ancient superpower just vanishing into the dirt without a single trace. We are not talking about some tiny, forgotten village here. This was a heavyweight empire that literally went toe-to-toe with the pharaohs of Egypt, only to get completely wiped from the history books for thousands of years.
Today, we're cracking open one of the biggest cold cases in archaeology to track down a lost civilization known as the Hittites. It's a story packed with massive battles, forgotten languages, and a pretty unexpected twist at the end. So let's get into it.
For a long time, scholars had this massive historical problem on their hands. In ancient biblical texts, the Hittites are mentioned over 50 times. They're described as this formidable army exporting chariots to neighboring kings. But in 19th century history books, total crickets. Because Egypt and Assyria were the undisputed heavyweights of antiquity, early historians just assumed these Hittites were a made-up literary invention. I mean, there was absolutely zero physical evidence they existed.
But, a few renegade researchers in the late 1800s weren't buying it. They started looking at some weird, anomalous ruins popping up around Anatolia and Syria. Scholars like Archibald Sayce began arguing that this missing empire was actually real, and that it was, as he put it, infinitely more powerful than that of Judah. Let's trace how this civilization went from being considered a complete myth to an undeniable reality dug straight out of the Anatolian dirt. It started in 1834 when Charles Texier stumbled on these massive ruins, though he totally misidentified them. Jump to 1884, and William Wright officially proposes a forgotten Hittite empire. But the real physical breakthrough came in 1906 when Hugo Winkler unearthed their royal archives. And finally, in 1915, Bedřich Hosny deciphered their language.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer scale of this find. When excavators dug into their capital, at Hattusa, they didn't just find a couple of broken pots. They found a royal archive with over 30,000 clay tablet fragments. Just like that, the Hittites went from being a historical ghost to one of the most well-documented civilizations in the ancient world. To understand their power, we have to look at Hattusa. This capital brilliantly illustrates their intense defensive paranoia. We are talking about a sprawling 400-acre metropolis locked behind 6 kilometers of massive, double cyclopean walls. They even built a 71-meter subterranean postern tunnel for sneak attacks during sieges. Inside those walls, it was a deeply complex society with over 30 religious temples, just completely built to withstand anything thrown at it. But to support a massive city like that, you need a serious military edge. The Hittite economy was surprisingly decentralized, mostly because of the rugged terrain, but it funded a highly innovative military built around the 3-man chariot. By adding a third person to the crew, they got this heavier, much more stable platform that absolutely wrecked in close combat. It gave them a huge tactical advantage over the lighter 2-man chariots that the Egyptians were using. When you expand your empire southward, eventually you're going to run headfirst into the other major heavyweight on the block. That collision triggered the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BCE, where the Hittite chariot armies clashed directly with Pharaoh Ramesses II. It was literally one of the biggest chariot battles in human history. But the truly remarkable part happened 15 years later in 1259 BCE, when they signed the Egyptian-Hittite peace treaty. This is the first known parity peace treaty in history, and it permanently cemented the Hittites as absolute equals to the pharaohs. Even superpowers don't last forever, right? Right around 1200 BCE, the whole Mediterranean world went through this violent, catastrophic event we call the Bronze Age collapse. Hattusa fell, likely due to a mix of internal strife, the Sea Peoples, and Kafka tribes pushing in from the north. But here is the thing, the civilization itself didn't just entirely vanish into thin air. Instead, they adapted. If we look at the late Bronze Age versus the early Iron Age, there is a massive shift. The centralized Anatolian Empire fractured, and the survivors moved south into northern Syria. They set up a network of smaller, decentralized city-states like Carchemish. They basically transitioned from an imperial powerhouse into a network of highly skilled Neo-Hittite mercenary states. Now, this shift actually builds a perfect historical bridge. Remember those biblical texts we talked about at the very beginning? Well, these Iron Age mercenary survivors perfectly match those descriptions. We see figures like Uriah the Hittite serving as an elite warrior in King David's army. We see King Solomon making serious money through an international chariot trade with them. And we even read about Syrian armies being completely terrified of the hired kings of the Hittites. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces perfectly fit together.
Most of the puzzle pieces fit anyway. And that brings us to our final lingering historical puzzle. Remember that translation breakthrough in 1915? When Hrozny deciphered the cuneiform tablets, the very first sentence he translated was roughly, "Now bread you will eat, then water you will drink." By matching the words for eat and water to modern languages, he famously proved that the Anatolian Hittite language was actually Indo-European.
But here is the massive demographic contradiction that creates. The giant Anatolian Empire up north was completely Indo-European in language and culture. But the early Canaanite Hittites, the ones described living down south during the patriarchal era, they had entirely Semitic names, like Ephron, Zohar, and Ada. The two groups don't match up at all.
Right now, scholars are basically split into three camps, trying to solve this ancient mismatch. Some think the early texts are just anachronistic retrojections, basically later authors projecting the Iron Age Hittites back into the deep past. Others argue for a migration theory, pointing to a rare Indo-European cremation site found near the Amman airport as proof they settled there early on. And a third group thinks it's just an etymological conflation, meaning an early local Semitic tribe and the massive Northern Empire just happen to share a very similarly translated name.
Which leaves us with a pretty wild, unresolved question to chew on. We found the missing empire, we found their massive chariots, and their ancient treaties. But at the end of the day, did a simple translation error accidentally merge a world-dominating northern superpower with a totally unrelated local Semitic tribe?
What the fact? Follow for more.